The air in Nanjingshan, sharp and clear beneath a wide, blue sky, carries the sense of jasmine tea, street food spices, and coastal eucalyptus. It is a city of striking contrasts and harmonious blends. Pagoda-style skyscrapers of steel and glass rise majestically, standing beside traditional temples and serene courtyard structures, their glazed tile roofs catching the sunlight, a mosaic of history and innovation. Wide, tree-lined avenues, designed for efficient traffic flow, bustle with silent electric vehicles and integrated automated transit systems. Signs and elegant Mandarin characters adorn buildings, occasionally interspersed with scripts from other languages spoken across the continent, acknowledging its diverse human tapestry. It is January 2025, and Nanjingshan is the vibrant capital of the Southern Land Province, a vast, resource-rich territory across the southern seas, a vital part of an enduring Chinese sphere, a world shaped by voyages made centuries before Captain Cook. In our familiar history, the Ming Dynasty's maritime expeditions under Admiral Zheng He, 1405 to 1433, were monumental. Massive fleets of hundreds of ships, including colossal treasure ships over 400 feet long, sailed the Indian Ocean, reaching East Africa. Their aims were diplomatic and economic, projecting Ming power, establishing tribute, engaging in state trade, gathering intelligence. These voyages demonstrated unparalleled shipbuilding and navigation. However, this era was brief. By the 1430s, the immense financial and human cost, coupled with strong opposition from influential Confucian scholar officials who favored internal stability and defense against northern threats, led to the expedition's definitive curtailment. The fleets decayed, records were suppressed, and stringent maritime prohibitions restricted private overseas contact. China turned inward, abandoning its leading naval position for centuries. The pivotal divergence occurred precisely here. The Ming Dynasty's maritime ambition did not wane. Zheng He's voyages were not definitively curtailed but maintained momentum and expanded. The reasons could vary: a different imperial succession with a stronger vision for maritime power, a powerful pro-maritime faction counteracting isolationists, or voyages yielding such extraordinary and consistent returns that costs were justified. Earlier, less documented advancements in shipbuilding or navigation from the Song or Tang dynasties might also have made sustained long-distance voyages inherently more feasible, fostering a continuous tradition the Ming then recognized and amplified. Regardless of the precise catalyst, the fundamental consequence was a sustained and evolving Chinese maritime presence extending far beyond the Indian Ocean. While our timeline saw fleets eventually cease, in this alternate history, the imperative to explore the lesser Southern Ocean and what lay beyond persisted. Driven by scientific curiosity, the strategic goal of securing distant resources, or perhaps based on accumulated knowledge or compelling rumors, these persistent voyages ventured further south. Utilizing advanced navigation and shipbuilding techniques, they eventually reached the massive continent situated far across the southern seas, a landmass whose existence may have been previously unknown or vaguely hypothesized. They named this newly confirmed and monumental landmass Nanfang Jidaolu, the Southern Land. Unlike the brief, impactful visits for diplomacy and trade that characterized Zheng He's historical voyages to established polities, the interaction with the Southern Land, due to its nature as a vast continent with immense perceived resource potential, took a different, more transformative trajectory: sustained contact, the establishment of permanent footholds, and eventually, systematic settlement and colonization. Early scouting missions likely reported back to the imperial court on the continent's immense size, its seemingly inexhaustible natural resources, vast forests providing valuable timber, potentially rich mineral deposits, extensive plains suitable for agriculture, and a bewildering array of unique flora and fauna. Crucially, these explorers also encountered the diverse indigenous populations who had inhabited the land for tens of thousands of years, living in complex societies with deep connections to their environment. This was not an empty land, but territory long settled and managed by its original peoples. The Ming response, supported by the continued maritime policy, went beyond mere exploration. It moved relatively quickly towards sustained contact and settlement. This transition was likely strategic and phased, beginning with fortified trading posts or resource extraction camps. As the viability and value of the southern land became clearer, more structured colonization plans were implemented. This involved dispatching not just sailors and soldiers, but significant numbers of civilian settlers, families of farmers skilled in various agricultural techniques, skilled craftsmen, engineers, particularly for hydraulic works, scholars, physicians, and administrators, the essential building blocks of a new society. Ships carried essential supplies and the complex social, administrative, and legal frameworks of the Ming state across the vast Southern Ocean. This was a deliberate, state-sponsored effort to project Chinese civilization and control onto a new continent. Establishing early settlements was immensely difficult, requiring significant ingenuity and adaptation. The sheer distance from China proper meant precarious supply lines, requiring sophisticated logistics and resilient ships. The environment was vastly different from southern China, varied climates, soil types, unpredictable weather, requiring significant adaptation in agriculture, building practices, and daily life. Settlers had to learn which crops would grow, how to build structures resistant to local conditions, and how to find and purify water. Perhaps the most complex, challenging, and defining factor was the interaction with the diverse indigenous peoples. This contact was by no means uniform. It varied immensely depending on the specific indigenous nation encountered, their organization, and the intentions, needs, and actions of the particular group of Chinese settlers or officials. In areas desired for agriculture or resources, conflict and violent displacement undoubtedly occurred, leading to devastating consequences for indigenous communities, mirroring tragic outcomes elsewhere. Superior Chinese technology, military organization, and introduced epidemic diseases against which indigenous populations had little immunity often gave settlers advantages. However, the historical narrative in the southern land is seen as more complex and nuanced. In other regions, interactions might have been characterized more by cautious coexistence, mutual observation, and pragmatic trade relationships for valuable local resources. There were likely periods and regions where alliances were forged between groups of settlers and indigenous nations, perhaps driven by shared necessity in facing environmental conditions or even against rival groups or later external pressures. Cultural exchange occurred naturally through proximity, necessity, and observation, borrowing technologies, e.g., indigenous fire stick farming, Chinese metalworking, adopting linguistic terms, adapting customs, and mutual influence on artistic styles, music, and foodways. While diseases were exchanged, altering demographics on both sides, the patterns and severity might have differed from the catastrophic impact of European diseases in the Americas due to variations in pathogens, timing, the nature of contacts, and the health/social structures of the populations involved. Maintaining connection over centuries, through the rise and fall of dynasties in China proper, added further layers of complexity. The southern land might experience periods of greater self-governance or autonomy when the central Chinese state was weak, followed by renewed efforts at control, investment, and administration when it was strong, reinforcing ties through new waves of migration, official appointments, and infrastructure projects. Administrators, military officials, scholars, and merchants continued to be sent from China, reinforcing cultural and political ties. Crucially, local leadership emerged, comprising Chinese-descended individuals and potentially integrated indigenous individuals. Trade routes, official and unofficial, facilitated flow of people, goods, ideas, and technologies. Scholars documented the new land, its geography, climate, diverse peoples, unique flora and fauna, creating a vast and detailed body of knowledge within the Chinese sphere, a crucial, if sometimes biased, resource for future generations. By the time European explorers and trading companies reached the South Indian Ocean and Pacific in the 17th and 18th centuries, they found it was no longer an undiscovered or sparsely populated wilderness. Instead, they encountered a vast continent already claimed, settled by a population with a centuries-old history, possessing established cities, extensive agricultural regions, significant resource operations, and integrated politically and economically into a powerful East Asian sphere of influence. This fundamentally altered global exploration and colonialism. European ambitions had to navigate an established Chinese presence, leading to different patterns of trade, diplomacy, and rivalry than in our timeline. The race for colonial dominance in the Pacific unfolded in a world where a powerful Chinese sphere extended far into the southern hemisphere. The impact on indigenous populations globally was also altered. Outcomes in this southern landmass were shaped by Chinese, not European, dominance, leading to a unique historical reality with its own complex legacies of conflict, cooperation, displacement, and cultural exchange, distinct from the European colonial experience. This altered history fundamentally reshaped the balance of global power and the narrative of human expansion across the globe, creating a world where the Chinese sphere held significant sway in the southern hemisphere. This centuries-long process of continuous settlement, complex interaction, cultural adaptation, technological innovation, and sustained growth, all originating from the continued maritime endeavors of the Ming Dynasty, laid the profound historical foundation for the southern land province that exists in 2025. Its identity is inextricably linked to the enduring political will that kept those Ming ships sailing south, the ingenuity and resilience of generations of settlers adapting to a new world, and the deep, complex, and often challenging history forged over centuries between those who came across the seas and the original inhabitants of the continent. It is a past that does not remain buried, but continues to shape the present in profound, sometimes unexpected, and critically important ways, as contemporary Southern landers grapple with the layers of history embedded in their land and their society, seeking to understand the intricate connections between the past and the future. Stepping onto the wide, meticulously clean avenues of Nanjingshan in 2025 is to inhabit a world where history isn't just chronicled in museums, but is a living, breathing, integrated part of daily life. The city, with its layered architecture and polyglot murmur of voices, stands as a vibrant testament to the culmination of over 5 centuries of a unique historical trajectory. The Southern Land Province is not merely a geographical entity, it is a dynamic civilization in its own right, deeply Chinese in its foundational roots, yet utterly distinct, forged by the continent's immense scale, the resilience of its indigenous cultures, and their long, intricate history of their intertwining. It is a powerful engine within the broader Chinese sphere, contributing significantly to its strength, advancement, and richness, its very existence a constant echo of those Ming ships that sailed ever southward, changing the world. The growth of major cities like Nanjingshan, Jingzhou in the west, and numerous others across the coasts and inland was a continuous process spanning centuries. Early settlements matured into sprawling, sophisticated metropolises. Principles of traditional Chinese urban planning were adapted to local topography, climate, and materials. Courtyard houses evolved alongside modern high-rises, incorporating local stone and unique designs. Infrastructure was monumental, extensive networks of high-speed rail, automated roads, air transport, large-scale water management projects, irrigation systems, dams, desalination, and sophisticated ports linking the southern land globally. A cutting-edge digital infrastructure further binds the territory, enabling seamless communication and economic activity. In 2025, the southern land holds significant power and a unique identity within the Chinese sphere. It is a powerful, semi-autonomous province or even a collection of states closely aligned with China, implying deep interdependence and shared strategic alignment. Perhaps a federation with substantial self-governance over internal affairs, aligning with the central Chinese government on national matters. Nanjingshan is the administrative capital, overseeing the vast territory. This political evolution reflects the continent's unique history, distance, and the development of a distinct Southern lander identity. The economy is robust, diverse, and highly advanced, built on abundant natural wealth and propelled by centuries of technological adaptation and innovation. Resource extraction is vital: minerals, energy, rare earths, utilizing sophisticated, environmentally conscious techniques. Agriculture is a cornerstone, having evolved through continuous adaptation to diverse climates and soils. This includes advanced irrigation, soil management, drought-resistant and adapted crop strains, through breeding and bioengineering, and precision farming leveraging AI and sensor data. Some practices implicitly or explicitly incorporate principles from indigenous practices. Bioengineering is a cutting-edge field, leveraging biodiversity for new medicines, materials, and agricultural applications, often enriched by documented knowledge and indigenous understanding. The southern land is a hub of research, innovation, and value-added industries. Culture is a vivid, layered tapestry. Mandarin is the primary language of government and commerce, but various regional Chinese dialects and numerous indigenous languages remain vibrant, supported by formal preservation and bilingual education. Multilingual signage is common. Traditional Chinese festivals are celebrated, organically adapted to Australian seasons and incorporating local elements, Lunar New Year in summer, Qingming Jie in spring honoring ancestors and landscapes. Indigenous ceremonies are observed, increasingly recognized or participated in by broader society, reflecting coexistence and a growing understanding of the deep past. Arts and literature express this blended identity. Painting combines classical Chinese techniques with Australian landscapes. Calligraphy incorporates indigenous motifs. Music blends Chinese instruments and scales with indigenous rhythms. Literature explores the history, relationship with the land, and evolving Southern lander identity. Architecture blends Chinese classical elements with environmentally attuned local principles. Social structures synthesize Confucian values, family, education, hierarchy, with the pragmatism of pioneering life and influences from indigenous social organization, land stewardship, community decision-making. Cuisine is a delightful fusion, Chinese techniques applied to Australian ingredients like native fruits, kangaroo, and emu, creating entirely new flavor profiles. The established Chinese presence in Australia fundamentally reshaped global history. European powers, arriving later, found it claimed and developed, preventing widespread colonization. Interaction was limited to trade and diplomacy with the dominant power, altering the geopolitical landscape and the history of discovery in the Asia-Pacific. The impact on indigenous populations globally was also altered. Outcomes were shaped by Chinese dominance, leading to a unique historical reality. It is into this rich, complex world that we find Li Mei. As a senior environmental scientist for the Southern Land Ecological Preservation Directorate, her agency manages the continent's unique ecosystems, a crucial task given centuries of impact. Working from a research station in the vast central grasslands, she uses advanced satellite imagery, environmental sensors, and AI analysis. Her work is personal. Her ancestors arrived in the Ming era, fueling her passion for early settlement history and the complex interactions with indigenous peoples. She understands the present environment is shaped by the past's echoes. She often thinks of these stories, anchoring her work. She sips from a porcelain teacup, its delicate blue and white pattern a small, tangible piece of the great China that birthed her family's history here, now intertwined with the Southern land. One cycle, while reviewing routine automated reports, a persistent alert flashes from her AI system. It flags a significant, troubling anomaly in biodiversity data from a remote highland region, a sudden, localized decline in key indicator species, unusually rapid and inconsistent with known factors. This region is historically significant for early, often cooperative, interactions focusing on land management between settlers and a local indigenous nation, making the decline puzzling. Recognizing the potential, unsettling link between past land use and modern decline, Li Mei formulates a complex, unconventional query for her AI: analyze this current decline data. Cross-reference it against all available historical land management records for this region, from Ming to present. Include both digitized official government reports and transcribed, authenticated oral histories from local indigenous communities. Look for specific practices, farming, water management, extraction, implemented historically. Compare how these practices are described/assessed in official reports versus indigenous histories. Correlate past practices, especially where interpretations differ, with current decline, paying attention to whether practices described as successful in official records correlate with negative long-term impacts documented or predicted in indigenous histories. The AI initiates the massive processing task, accessing centuries of disparate data streams. Formal government documents detailing yields and engineering alongside transcribed indigenous histories preserving knowledge and warnings. Hours pass. Li Mei waits, the low hum of servers a backdrop to her focus. She watches the data visualization unfold on her monitors, layering centuries of human activity onto contemporary ecological stress points, searching for a pattern, a connection, a ghost in the data. Suddenly, a critical correlation snaps into sharp focus. The AI highlights a specific microregion where Ming-era agricultural expansion, recorded as successful, used a technique that directly contradicted indigenous knowledge in oral histories. Analysis reveals the link. This Ming technique, likely unsuited to the highland soil and water, while boosting short-term yield, subtly altered soil chemistry over time. This latent issue, a slow poison, manifested in the modern era as stress on the ecosystem, worsened by modern runoff. Li Mei stares at the visual evidence, a haunting map overlaying 16th-century land surveys with 21st-century decline heat maps, aligning perfectly with the ancient irrigation project. A profound, visceral sense of connection across centuries washes over her, touching the consequences of decisions long past. An act from over 400 years ago, seen as progress, is causing a crisis, a consequence of prioritizing one knowledge system without integrating another. Sadness for damage and disregarded wisdom is followed by fierce determination. The weight of responsibility settles upon her. Her discovery's implications are vast, underscoring the power of history and the vital need to integrate diverse knowledge, especially indigenous ecological wisdom, into modern policy and land management. Managing the Southern land in 2025 demands confronting this complex legacy. Li Mei compiles a report, backed by data, and contacts her supervisor, Director Zhang, a pragmatic administrator who has seen enough to know history is rarely simple. Director, she begins via video call, voice steady. The Highland anomaly's roots are centuries deep. Analysis indicates a direct link to early settlement practices, with a discrepancy when cross-referenced with indigenous accounts. She details findings, presenting correlations and the contradiction between reports and histories. Zhang listens, growing guarded. Oral histories, Mei, he says slowly. Are you certain? Some prefer official records. Politically sensitive. He voices the conflict of interpretations and bureaucratic inertia. Despite potential pushback, Zhang recognizes the scientific rigor and potential severity. He authorizes immediate steps. A ground team is dispatched for analysis. Crucially, Li Mei is authorized to consult with the local indigenous community. She travels to a community center, meeting Elder Jian, a respected knowledge holder whose face is a map of time, eyes calm. Li Mei presents her data. Elder Jian listens patiently. When Li Mei explains the contradiction, comparing Ming's success with indigenous warnings, the elder nods sadly. The river was angered, he says, voice a low rumble. The soil wept when they forced the water where it did not wish to go. Our old one saw it. He shares poignant details from oral histories of the land becoming sick after settlers changed water flow, predicting decline. This interaction between science and ancient wisdom is crucial, corroborating archived histories and building a bridge for cooperation. The consequences of Li Mei's discovery ripple outwards, initiating a complex process. Addressing the soil issue is not quick or inexpensive, it requires costly, long-term remediation. Implementing changes isn't purely scientific, it's deeply social, economic, and political. Affected land is likely still used, requiring delicate negotiations with land users who may resist changes or accepting their history's role. Significant bureaucratic hurdles exist, departments with competing priorities, officials resistant to non-traditional knowledge, politicians wary of acknowledging historical missteps. Li Mei's report, backed by data and testimony, is a crucial tool. Li Mei's discovery thus expands beyond a scientific finding. It becomes a catalyst for confronting the complex layers of the Southern land's past and its ongoing impact. It highlights the necessity of not just preserving indigenous knowledge but actively integrating it into governance, environmental policy, and land management. Managing this vast territory demands a clear-eyed confrontation with its multifaceted legacy, celebrating achievements, acknowledging mistakes, rectifying consequences, and ensuring indigenous wisdom is an actively integrated cornerstone of future stewardship. Her story, initiated by AI and confirmed through layered records and living memory, is a single thread woven into the fabric of the Southern land's unique existence, pointing towards a future built on a more complete, honest, and integrated understanding of its deep and complex past.